Hello everyone, I'm Zenith, and welcome back to A Year in Gaming, where I talk about a game I've completed recently, or that I've wanted to talk about for a fairly long time. Put your film noir goggles on and get your dynamite ready, because today I'm talking about the Saboteur. Viva la Resistance.
The Führer welcomes all second-class citizens into the Reich. Transit papers are mandatory at all checkpoints. Failure to present proper documentation will be severely punished. Report any subversive behavior to the nearest political bureau.
There are no words for the pain this war has caused.
We won't get another chance to break out.
Spirit is also a casualty during war.
There is no turning back now.
May he find peace in the next world.
Here's to you, brother.
I'm just getting started.
I remember when I first heard about the Saboteur. Back in 2007, in the pages of Game Informer, there was an article that got me excited for the future of the PlayStation 3. At the time, the PlayStation 3 was almost a year old, and had very few AAA titles backing it up. While the console still had potential, I had decided that I wasn't going to spend $600 on a console unless there were some definitive games on the system. And then I saw this article. For some reason, this article held my interest more than BioShock and Uncharted, both of which went on to define the PlayStation 3. At the time, the game was advertised as Saboteur, Viva la Resistance, and it captured my attention immediately. This was an open-world game set during World War II, where you banded together with the underground French resistance in order to defeat the Nazis and retake control of France. That concept alone held my interest, but what really sold me on the game at the time was the art design. Saboteur's art design looked like it was ripped straight out of Casablanca because it oozed film noir with each screenshot. Most of the game was presented in black and white, but enemies, enemy vehicles, and enemy buildings showed up as either yellow or red, depending on how aware enemies were of your presence. The contrast of yellow and red against the black and white was simply stunning. Back then, I hadn't seen anything like it before, and it drew me into the world of the game with each picture I saw. As I continued to read through the article, I discovered that the artwork was dynamic. Every time you freed a city from Nazi control, that area would change from black and white to full color. This further cemented the idea that you were taking back control of the city. Each time you liberated a city, the Nazi threat would be less, and you would get visual confirmation that you had saved the French citizens in that area. All of these ideas came together in my mind all at once, and I got excited. This game was unique, visually stunning, and offered more of an emotional investment for the player than the average open-world game. This was my most anticipated game for PlayStation 3 back in 2007, and I saved up my money like crazy to buy a PS3 just to get this game. But then something strange happened. Saboteur Viva la Resistance disappeared completely. For a long time, there was no information on the game, and I began to wonder if it was going to come out at all. Almost a year later, new information on the game finally surfaced. The game had been rebranded as The Saboteur, dropping the subtitle completely, and was going to come out in 2009.
That can't be good!
Now, I don't know if there are problems behind the scenes, or if Pandemic was having internal conflicts with publisher Electronic Arts, but this did not bode well for the game. completely rebranding a game that close to release runs an incredible risk of losing gamers who were excited about the game in the first place, especially when there was no new information up until that point. This announcement took me completely by surprise and made me take a step back and rethink my purchase of the game. I decided to wait until it came out and see what critics had to say about the game. At the same time, 2009 turned out to be a landmark year for video games, with the release of Batman Arkham Asylum, Resident Evil 5, Pokemon Platinum, Braid, Demon's Souls, and many other games that demanded my attention. In fact, I completely forgot about the Saboteur until May of 2011, when I spotted the game in the used section of GameStop. I picked it up, played it for a bit, and set it back down on my video game shelf. 3 years later, I finally sat down and completed the game. So, what did I think of the Saboteur? I'm sad to say that I came out of the game heavily disappointed. Now, before you start pointing fingers and saying I don't know what I'm talking about, hear me out for a second. The reason why I've spent the last 5 minutes talking about my history with the game is because I want you to understand that I didn't want to hate this game. I try to be positive with my reviews because I'm so passionate about gaming, but every once in a while there's a game that just doesn't meet your expectations. In the case of the Saboteur, I have a very personal history with the game. I had very high expectations for the game, and they slowly died down as time went by. Let's take a closer look at the Saboteur, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. The main component that works about the Saboteur is the story of the game. As I've mentioned earlier, the game is set during World War II, just as the Nazis seized control of France. You play as Sean Devlin, an Irish race car driver who travels to the northern edge of France to compete in an underground European road race. After a series of unfortunate events,
Is this a bad time?
Devlin finds himself embroiled in a guerrilla war against the Nazis who are terrorizing France. The story takes many twists and turns, and will keep you guessing the entire time just who is an ally and who is secretly helping the Nazis. There are many grand-scale events, such as an intense fight on a Zeppelin that is on fire and exploding around you, a gunfight at the top of the Eiffel Tower, and a torture sequence that nearly had me in tears.
Your friend cannot hear you at the moment. I'm afraid the pain was more than he could bear. Franziska tells me you have been eager to see the look on my face. I hope you are not disappointed.
What the fuck is going on here?
Do you believe I spend every waking minute behind the wheel of a race car? I have other, more practical talents with which to serve the Reich. My services are in great demand of late.
Why are you doing this?
I'm a patriot.
You're a fucking animal.
We are all animals beneath the skin. My godfather taught me that. He was a butcher, did you know? He taught me that the flesh holds no secrets once the skin has been removed.
It does take a few missions for the plot to truly kick in, but once it does, it doesn't let up. The story is the true highlight of the Saboteur, and I don't want to spoil it for you, because you need to see this for yourself. Unfortunately, the rest of the game does not fare quite so well. First of all, the characters are one of the major problems in the Saboteur. Every single character is a stereotype of a stereotype. Devlin is an Irishman who drinks heavily and always gets into bar fights. The French are always portrayed as staunch womanizers who can't handle themselves in a fight. And the British government just sits there and lets Devlin do all their dirty work. Every character has an over-the-top accent, especially the Germans, who all give especially hammy performances. It's clear the actors have passion in their performances, but I just can't take them seriously half of the time, and that does detract a bit from the story.
Ah, bollocks! What's got into you, mate?
What the hell are you doing?
What's it bloody look like?
Your whore is my girl now, Sean. I will not have another man picking up her skirt.
Oh, for fuck's sake, Jules.
You're a driver now. You want respect on the circuit? You gotta stop thinking like a mechanic.
Alright, and put on airs like some posh wanker with a silver spoon up me arse? No thanks, brother.
Most of the side characters are boring one-note caricatures who show up with a mission and then disappear for a while, and the main characters don't have much to do either. The only characters I felt I could really get behind were Devlin and the villain. Devlin may be stereotypical, but he does go through a distinct character arc throughout the game, and he grows on you after a while. The villain of the game is just so over the top that I couldn't help but love him. He doesn't have much motivation beyond, "I am a Nazi and killing is what I do," but the performance really made him stand out. It's like Tim Curry in Legend. The character has no motivation, but the actor still made it stand out. The visual design of the Saboteur is absolutely stunning half of the time, and this is my main complaint of the game. The art design had so much potential, but a lot of it is simply wasted. The half that actually works is the main visual design for the game. As I said before, the black and white film noir color scheme looks brilliant when contrasted with the yellow and red of the enemy factions. The first half of the game, I couldn't look away from the gorgeous imagery, especially during the Zeppelin sequence. However, problems start to set in when you liberate areas of the city. As soon as you free the first area of Paris from Nazi control, the color scheme changes, and it baffles me why they went with this color palette for when Paris is actually free.
It's brown! Every color in this comic is brown!
You see, when I first heard about this design, I figured that the city would be displayed in vibrant color to showcase a juxtaposition between the dreary black and white of occupied Paris. Instead, everything is a dull brown that makes everything seem lifeless. This doesn't feel like I've liberated Paris. I feel like I've just turned on the lights, and that goes against everything that this game was trying to convey in the first place. In addition to this, districts that have been freed from Nazi control don't appear to be any different outside of the color change. Citizens don't behave any different or act any happier. You aren't any safer in these districts. Resistance fighters aren't any more abundant here. Aside from a few less Nazis walking the streets, it feels like you've done absolutely nothing.
Nothing, absolutely nothing, absolutely nothing.
This could have been a highly emotional part of the game, making you get attached to these districts because you change how they operate in the end, but it just ends up feeling lifeless and ultimately pointless. You have no real effect on this city, and that is the real shame here. While it doesn't feel very satisfying to liberate the city on an emotional level, I will say that it was fun to complete the side quests that end up liberating France from the Nazis. Another real strength of this game is just how big the in-game world is, and how many side quests there are in the game. There are thousands of different points on the map that showcase optional objectives called ambient free play events. Each free play event has something different for you to do. from blowing up Nazi tanks and weapons, to killing Nazi generals, to scaling buildings and seeing different viewpoints. There are so many things to do in each city that it never really gets boring. Granted, there were a couple points where I got a bit tired of doing all the free play events, but I just continued on with the main missions, and those have even more variety. In terms of gameplay, the Saboteur works well for the most part. The gun controls in the game aren't the best in the world, but they're certainly better than Grand Theft Auto, and there is enough variety in the weapons that it's fun to experiment with new and improved firepower. The driving mechanics work surprisingly well for their time, and I always found it fun to steal a car and go for a drive through the enormous countryside or race against other people in the underground circuit. Brawling works okay, but I never really liked fighting that way, except for when sneaking into Nazi bases. It's only really useful for taking care of Nazis silently, and that is helpful during stealth sections, but there really aren't too many of these stealth sections to begin with. The sabotage mechanic is my favorite part of the gameplay though, and the fact that it works so well shows the potential inherent in this game. The basic idea is that you can buy dynamite and other explosives at resistance dealers all over France. When you have explosives, you can press the D-pad to equip any explosive at a moment's notice. By pressing up on the D-pad, you can place your explosives and blow up anything you like in the game. In addition to dynamite, which is mainly used to blow up Nazi weapons and towers, you also have pipe bombs to throw at enemies, and RX, which can be placed and detonated remotely. There are so many different possibilities when it comes to explosives, especially when you just want to create havoc around the city. I spent hours going around the city just blowing stuff up for fun, and I never once got bored of it. The sabotage aspect of the Saboteur is simply brilliant, and makes me wish the rest of the game had reached the same lofty heights. At the end of the day, the Saboteur is a game with a lot of untapped potential. There are parts of this game that work incredibly well, and there are other parts that completely miss the mark. The story, side missions, and Saboteur elements all work extremely well, but the rest of the game is brought down by bland characters, visuals that only work half the time, a liberation mechanic that is ultimately pointless, in a world that feels lifeless. This game certainly has a lot of problems, and it left me feeling greatly disappointed, but there is still a lot to like about the Saboteur. When it works extremely well. When it doesn't, it's merely passable. In the end, I give the Saboteur a 6 out of 10. It has a lot of faults, but it's worth playing through at least once. I'm Zenith Rule, and I will see you guys next time on A Year in Gaming.
Thank you for watching the Media Meltdown. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome videos. And if you like what you see, show your support on the Patreon page at patreon.com/mediameltdown. See you all next time on the Media Meltdown.